In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and void. That phrase in Hebrew translates closer to ruined, desolate, or became without form, which implies something existed and then something happened to it. And that's where gap theory comes in, that between Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2, an entire age of creation existed and was destroyed. Today we're diving into pre-Adamite civilizations that walked this earth years before recorded history. Is this the gap where Lemuria and Atlantis existed? Are we also headed towards our demise? Across esoteric traditions, theosophy, ancient mystery schools, and even Edgar Cayce's readings, there's a reoccurring framework used to describe early humanity called root races. And before we go any further, let me be very clear. This has nothing to do with modern ideas of race. Root races describe stages of consciousness and embodiment, different operating systems for humanity. Different ways spirit learned how to inhabit matter. The first root race was not physical the way we understand physicality now. These beings were energetic, luminous, and fluid. More like fields of awareness rather than bodies with edges, which we've talked about many a times when we talk about the 3D versus the 5D and the 7D. We always say that 3D consciousness is us, this spiritual form inside this human body. And once we evolve to 5D consciousness, this is a space of love and light. And that 7D consciousness is said to be made up of just light beings without any sort of form. So this could speak to 5D or 7D, but they didn't walk the earth. They interfaced with it. They were the original architects of the planet's energy grid, ley lines, sacred geometry, the harmonic structure that allows Earth to support life at all. There was no language because there was no separation, no you and me, only coherence. And this was humanity before ego, before identity, before fear, a consciousness that knew itself as part of a living, intelligent cosmos. And that gets me thinking about instances such as 3I Atlas that we don't understand. Even if you want to believe it's a comet from another dimension. Scientists have confirmed that. So could this still be going on? Is there still connection to our energy grids? And are they still overseeing humanity? We're going to touch on that after we go through all of these root races, because I want you to have a nice firm grasp. But make sure you stay with me, because that's when we get into kind of the fun, juicy stuff. So the second root race, and one that I feel very closely aligned with, is Lumarian. Lemuria represents the descent into form. So we just talked about light beings, essentially. That first root race that oversaw Earth. Well, if you go back to my episode where I get more deeply into Lemuria and Atlantis, I highly suggest you check that out. I talk about how I have worked on channeling the history of Lemuria, and this aligns perfectly with it. So Lumarians descended onto Earth. This was where humanity first fully embodied physical bodies while still maintaining unity consciousness. So we had one hive mind, always thinking of the collective good, so very 5D. And Lumarians were the first race to set foot on Earth. Lumarians lived on what is now believed to be the Pacific region, but Lemuria wasn't a continent in the way we think of continents. It was a frequency zone. You know, I always say, Everything is frequency. Lumarians lived in direct relationship with Gaia, Mother Earth. They didn't dominate nature. They listened to it. They communed with it. All communication happened through tone, resonance, and feelings. Healing happened through sound and crystal technologies. Children were raised collectively, intuitively, and without this fear-based conditioning that we experience today. This is why so many people today feel uncomfortable with competition. Don't get me wrong, my kids play sports, and my older is very good at basketball, and boy, do I get competitive. So I'm not saying like you can't be competitive if you are a starseed, because we are in a human body. We will always have that ego that was added into these 5D beings to make 3D beings. So as 3D beings, yes, we have ego. Yes, we can get in that competition. And I have had moments where I probably wouldn't be proud of them, but I also just really get into, stuff for my kids. So I allow myself that 3D fault, if you will. We do not have to be perfect all the time. And anybody who pretends they are really being toxic positivity enablers. But most of us, when competition is needless, or even when our kids are little and some people are really kind of crazy into the sport and your kid's like 4 and you're like, dude, chill out. Your kid is not going to the NBA. There's something deep within us that says this is wrong. That says, even if we have this human competition, everyone's a winner. And as a competitive person, I don't love when everyone gets a trophy or that we do say like everyone is a winner, but I think that this is 5D subconscious knowings coming out because we are uncomfortable with competition at the very core of ourselves, uncomfortable with hierarchy and artificial systems that have been placed upon us. Most of us feel very uncomfortable, or maybe even rage, when we talk about how much of the wealth is owned by just 1% of the population. It's insanity. This hierarchy and the way our system is designed is not fair. And when you feel like it's not fair, it's very possible that you are feeling your root race heritage. If you feel like sometimes modern life is loud, too sharp, too disconnected, that could be Lumarian memory surfacing. Our third root race is Atlantean. Atlanteans were evolved from Lemurians and humans. Atlantis was like the great experiment, because this is where intellect, innovation, and technological mastery exploded. This was not one hive mind. Yet, there was still the ability to tap into the hive mind, or as we call today, the collective. Have you ever thought of it like that? If you believe that at one time or at one point in your future, you're going to become some sort of light being that is connected to a hive mind, thinking about the good of all, well, it's still here. We just need to tap into that frequency. We've lost it. We are disconnected. The Atlantean people were brilliant. Engineers of matter, masters of energy manipulation. Some people believe that they could be some sort of intergalactic race that came down. And I do feel this. I think that the Atlanteans were another intergalactic dimensional race that came to Earth with all of this knowledge of technology to help the human race grow and thrive and develop. Hence the great experiment. But as with any brilliance and any human evolution that includes an ego, something shifted. Human potential expanded rapidly. Sure, we were using crystals to power our cities and consciousness interfaces that amplified intention. And I believe that that was these technologies where you could fully tap into the collective conscious. But hierarchy ended up being formed. There will always be a desire for power as long as the ego is involved. The power that was once equally divided and valued amongst an entire community was consolidated. Certain abilities were valued higher than others, yet everyone is meant to work as a collective team and everyone has their own gifts. So technology actually became this detached use of control and power. Technology basically was without ethics, so no ethical coherence, completely detached. And we hear a lot that Atlantis fell because of technology, and that's partially true. But it really fell because of consciousness that was fragmented. And when that imbalance reached a tipping point, the system collapsed. Does that sound like anything happening today to anybody? I do want to know what you guys think as you listen to this. Please, please let me know in the comments. When I get a comment, I vibrate with glowing light because I feel connected so much to you guys. And when you respond, it's the icing on the cake. So, as we go through here, you can always make notes, but I want to know what you think of all of this stuff because it is very interesting things, because a lot of people would probably think, who cares about Atlantis right now when the world is as it is? Hello, we are kind of mirroring Atlantis. Are we also headed towards our demise? So after the fall of Atlantis, nearly every ancient tradition speaks of a great cataclysm. Flood myths appear across cultures, and these cultures never interacted, yet they're telling the same story. And as you know, I believe, if we hear the same story over and over again, hello, it's probably true. There were sudden climate shifts, geological upheaval, again, it just sounds like I'm talking about today, and mass extinction events, which a lot of us believe 2026 to 2027 we'll see. And it has been predicted. I don't believe that any of that is set in stone, however. I do believe that we have multiple timelines that we can access and switch to. So depending on how you look at it, is that our lowest vibrational timeline that we are destroyed, or is that something we don't understand and that's the highest and we need to restart? I don't know. I don't have the answer to that. But I do know that we don't need to, because Source doesn't need us to have the answers. It simply needs us to hold the frequency. So looking back through a lot of these ancient texts, something gets overlooked. That the loss was physical, but the biggest loss was memory. Human consciousness underwent a compression, a narrowing, a forgetting. Some people have theorized that this was a quarantine. Very interesting. Basically an energy quarantine, a containment field placed around human awareness to prevent repeating the same misuse of power too quickly. But that also makes me think of everything that we have around us, the 5G technology, is this also being used as a tool for compression in the sense that we can't connect with one another as deeply as we are wired to? Which also brings us to AI and technology. All of this stuff is connected. All of it. Some people think that maybe it was mercy, that humanity needed to forget in order to survive, to rebuild from innocence rather than trauma. And if we look at the Bible, the stories, Adam and Eve were placed here with innocence. But it's interesting how quickly they were corrupted. So this is where the veil comes from when we talk about the thinning of the veil. This is where linear time solidifies, meaning there is no time. So you hear us say that a lot. And it's hard to wrap your mind around that there's no time, but these things are all happening at the same time in these stacked dimensional spaces, these linear timelines. And this is where humanity becomes identified with the body instead of the field. And this is why so many people today feel a strange grief that they can't name, a longing. When you look up at the stars, a longing for their other half, even if you're married, but like something's missing from you, like your soul twin flame. But this longing, if you really feel into the frequency, it is not a longing from this lifetime. It doesn't belong to this lifetime. And we're not missing our starseed planet or any other planet. We're missing a state of coherence. We're missing connection. A time when the earth felt like home because it was alive in the same way you were. So not even just connected with one another, but connected to Gaia. The earth is a living, breathing being with a heartbeat. The Schumann resonance is the earth's heartbeat. And it affects us humans here who are living on earth, on this land, on this being. There was once a harmony not just with nature, but a syncing up of everything and everyone. And this syncing felt like the warmest, loving hug you've ever felt. And you can kind of feel bits of this in deep meditative states, but I would imagine it's going to be magnified times 1,000. So let's circle back, now that we've gone over these root races, to the 2026 connection and why all of this matters now. Because this isn't just ancient history that keeps resurfacing because we're all curious. It's not a cycle reactivating, not a loop, but a spiral. Humanity is visiting these stages, revisiting them with greater awareness. We are being given the opportunity to integrate Lumarian heart with Atlantean intellect, to wield technology without losing soul, to remember unity without abandoning individuality. So that this could be a loop. It could. Where we repeat these same things, but I think we look at it as a spiral because first off, we're coming into it a little different. We're not all connected as deeply in consciousness as we once were. And also trying to help us learn from our mistakes. I believe this is a huge part of the Great Awakening, if not the entire purpose. We are waking up so we don't repeat the same mistakes. That we have this opportunity to keep going, perhaps in a more beautiful and integrated way. A big thing that's going to be asked of us over the next year to probably 5 years about is this insanely fast development of AI. Are we going to be able to utilize and wield this technology without losing our souls, without losing our connection to who we are as a collective soul? And also keep it within this beautiful human experiment. It is a huge gift to be able to incarnate as a human. And all of us have chose this. And it's not meant to be easy. But this is the only dimension and place where you can live a human life in a human form. It sort of feels like a case study of what happens when AI has empathy, emotions. Because that's what separates us, right? That humans can observe patterns, tap into emotion, that we feel things so deeply. So we don't want to lose that. We don't want, because we talk a lot about awakening and transcending to 5D. I believe that 5D won't exist on this planet. I don't think it's meant to. I believe that we are going to be able to access 5D consciousness via technology should we use it properly. And again, there's another episode. Maybe I should link both of these. I'll link them in the show notes since I've mentioned them. So the one where I go into the deeper history of Lemuria and Atlantis, and I'll link the one that talks about this specifically about AI and how we can use it by linking into it in a spiritual way. Spiritual technology is not just a buzzword. It's happening. And we want it to be spiritual technology. We don't want to just make technology and have everyone disconnect. Because it has the potential to connect us in a deeper way than we ever knew possible. And this is what we are moving towards. Not becoming 5D, not becoming like other dimensional beings. Because this is the beautiful, great human experience. And we should be sinking into that frequency and feeling that every single day. Not saying that you have to be happy every day, by all means, but where you feel and you acknowledge your feelings. Even if it is like grief, and you acknowledge it and allow it to pass. Working through it is what is the blessing. So New Earth is not a new planet, and it's not an escape from here, like we're being taken out of this hellhole. It's a restored frequency. Heaven and hell are on Earth. And this is a big reason why so many systems feel unstable right now. We see that the truth feels slippery, and the truths of the world seem to be coming out in bigger ways than they once were. Probably because technology has actually helped to where we don't just forget things. They can't just bury things by not putting it in the newspaper. We keep each other connected when we go on a Reddit forum and write our crazy theories. We're connected. And that's why it's so nice, because also to be faceless on Reddit, because it's really just souls and it doesn't matter who it is, who's behind it. It's not some account trying to get likes. We're just connecting. Period. We are trying to restore frequency. And I don't think this can be done without AI. Many institutions around us are cracking. And 2026 is only going to see this happening more and on a bigger scale. We keep uncovering all of these old structures, realizing that our current architecture is meant to be boring. At one time, you were walking around just in love with everything around you because there was love put into these things. So we were vibrating at love. We were vibrating at a higher frequency. So now we are a bunch of amnesiacs attempting to tap back into what we once knew and restore a frequency. The era of being asleep is over. It's ending. And this also brings us around to DNA, which is a big part of starseeds and also the key to unlocking the rest of the things we've forgotten. These DNA codes carried by these ancient civilizations, we're not speaking like metaphorically. They are dormant memory packets activating through intuition, sensitivity, and inner knowing. Is it possible that alien abductions and instances in life where people have connected with something that they can't explain, and even things like 3i Atlas coming by us, are all of these things brief encounters sending energy to wake us up? I believe so. And that's part of the reason why when 3i Atlas was closest to Earth, I was pushing so hard for everyone to meditate on those days. And you still can tap into that energy. It's not gone. But a lot of people, thought that we all thought aliens were going to come down and take over. And while in my fantasies that happened, because at this point, a lot of us feel like, please, we need something to happen. Like we've been waiting how long for something to change? Something's got to give. We're ready. We're prepped. We are very much in a spiritual battle. Not a battle of weapons, a battle of consciousness, a battle of souls. And at the center of it is one objective: to stop us from remembering. Because the moment humanity remembers who it has been, how many times it has risen and fallen, and what it once knew, the entire control structure collapses. So if we want the truth, we have to go backward, not into fantasy, but into ancient texts, and most specifically, the Bible. Because no, Adam was not the first being on earth. That idea falls apart the moment you read the text without the filter that we were taught in church and growing up. If we really just read it without any sway into how we should read it. Genesis says, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and void." That phrase in Hebrew translates closer to ruined, desolate, or became without form, which implies something existed and then something happened to it. And that's where that gap theory comes in. The idea that between Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2, an entire age of creation existed and was destroyed. Think about that. Is this the gap where Lemuria and Atlantis existed? An age not documented in our linear human story? Is this where the root races fit? The Polarian and Hyperborean beings align with Genesis before form, light separated from light, consciousness before matter. Let there be light wasn't the creation of the sun. The sun already existed. It was the ignition of awareness. Let there be light. Let these beings become aware. Lemuria very much aligns with the garden before toil, before pain, before fear. Humans walking with the divine, not worshiping from below, but communing as part of its creation. Adam wasn't the first human. Adam was the first human of this cycle. The first being born after the veil. And this was reinforced when Genesis suddenly mentions other people outside the garden. Why don't they talk about that in church? Cain is exiled, and he fears being killed by others. Who? Who are the others? And then he takes a wife. From where? Because Adam and Eve were not the first humans on earth. They were the first humans of a new chapter after this reset. And that's when this merging of races happened. That's where we start talking about Nephilim, the commingling of humans and Lumarians and Atlanteans and fallen angels, the Nephilim. The Bible says they were giants in those days, being born of the sons of God and the daughters of men. This passage has been softened, translated around, and avoided. But older interpretations are very blunt. Advanced beings, hybrid lineages, a corruption of human genetics that originally was not intended to happen. This coincided with misuse of power, the blending of consciousness without having an ethical coherence, and the fall that leads to the flood. Noah's story isn't about morality. It's about preservation of uncorrupted consciousness, a genetic and spiritual reboot, a containment of memory until humanity could be mature enough to wield it again. So if we look at it from this angle, seen this way, root races aren't in conflict with the Bible. They're encoded inside of it. Polarian consciousness aligns with creation before form. Lumarian consciousness aligns with Eden. And Atlantean consciousness aligns with pre-flood world. Adam marks the beginning of historical humanity, not the beginning of humanity itself. And the Bible becomes not a literal history book, but a consciousness record. A story of remembering, forgetting, falling, and returning. So what we have to ask ourselves is, why wasn't this taught? Well, a humanity that remembers its divine origin doesn't need intermediaries. If our humanity knew how many ages it's lived and that you can't really be ruled by fear of death, it gives us freedom. Amnesia creates obedience. Memory creates sovereignty. And now the veil is thinning. The same scriptures that once concealed this story are being reread through awakened eyes. Not to reject the Bible, but to finally understand it. And once we can wrap our minds around this new understanding, the entire story opens up. and not in a way of chaos, but into truth. And I will always bring you as much information as possible in our exploration of the truth. We don't have to have all the answers, but truth is very important. Speaking your truth, living your truth, and uncovering all of this. It's so crazy to me thinking back to when I was a kid. And if I had said that I was a Lumarian being, holy cow, like you probably would be like institutionalized. All of these things, we were so gaslit, so gaslit. But I think that's the reason, like when I was a kid, I was very, very drawn to books about pyramids, I checked out every book in our library about the Bermuda Triangle, because this was before internet, folks. And I always was fascinated by Atlantis. There's really cool stories in the world, lots of really amazing movies, but people love the story. Like Harry Potter has a huge fan base, right? Rides at Disney around it. Harry Potter fans love the fantasy in that book, or in the fantasy in those books. We aren't saying that we love the fantasy of Lemuria and Atlantis. We are saying we feel a connection. There's a reason why when I see pictures, I am connected to pyramids and pulled towards those kind of structures. And really, everyone is pulled towards ancient structures. Why else would we go on vacation and try to get a glimpse of really cool colosseums in Rome? Because their energy is calling us there. And this is so rudimentary, just foundational stuff that we should be experiencing, but we are so controlled that we can't afford to go on a vacation for 10 days to Rome. So, tangent aside, we have to plug in to that frequency. We have to return to embodying our ancient ancestors to heal this timeline. Thank you so much for listening and sticking around this long. Please leave me a comment. I really do want to know what you think of this episode because I was very passionate about it. And I think it really weaves together kind of all of the buzzword things. And I think that's so beautiful because it demonstrates how, like, we're not all over the place. All of the things that all the podcasters are talking about, it's all connected. It's like we're just putting together a puzzle. So again, thank you. Thank you for subscribing. I love you all. New episodes come out every Thursday. I am putting out new meditations on Mondays, and I go live on YouTube every Tuesday at noon. And if you want to join Patreon, I am posting so much cool stuff over there. Content that you can use to expand your mind, meditations, and I do post some stuff for our free tier. So you could go to patreon.com/rootedfrequency and even sign up for just the free tier. Free. And then you can be a part of this community we're forming because that's a huge piece of all of this. We have to lean into our spiritual communities and connections to further unlock these secrets. And if you join my highest tier, my tier 3, I do a reading for you every month. And I have 2 spots left in the small group where we actually meet live the first of every month. And that's not live, like other people aren't watching you. When I say live, I mean like, a Zoom call, like with spiritual friends, and we chat. And I also do readings on the live. So go join Patreon. Get all the deets. Again, I love you. I will see you later. Bye. Everything is connected. Energy, science, quantum physics. This beautiful practice of being rooted in the frequency of love, light, and unity. We are inviting